being able to do more, being able to perform in peak performance, which may be doing more for less, being able to accomplish more with less energy, time, and attention and focus, this requires deep rejuvenation. And the more we get, that, the more we get curious of like, what is deep rejuvenation? Like, what does that look like? So I'll pivot back into our slides. And before I live my handy dandy notepad here, it's worthy to note that in order to do this well, in order to rock both sides of this equation, from the research I've done and from different communities I've been in that rock this, is it basically takes being in a group that's doing it. So the group is they're into transformation. They're into identity evolution. What does that mean? They're into, if we just back up here, they're a group that has as a shared value, this is what we do. We go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. We become people that have increased capacity over time, and we're dedicated to that. And we know that what's going on in the world out there is disruption, right? There's just a lot of people that are actually getting bounced backwards. We can see this in terms of statistics, right? Even if you look at really smart professional communities, such as those that are in the tech world, right? There's a ton of money in the tech world, but what we're finding, right? There's a lot of money in tech. There's a lot of ability, ingenuity, innovation. All of this is happening, but what's actually happening is people are getting less sleep, and they're experiencing an increase in mental disruption. And we're seeing a massive increase in immune-related and autoimmune diseases. So it's a problem, right? Like there's big, and I don't have to get into the details with all of you about it, but there's just a lot of problems with understanding that what current culture is doing is not this. Is not 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. It's not this over here. Current culture is not doing that. Current culture is regressing. So that's what we're up against. So unless we get ourselves in a group who's going 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, who knows what they're doing and knows how to do it, it's hard. And you can actually hit levels where you don't experience deeper levels of rejuvenation each year. And therefore you don't give yourself the root, right, in order to rise. You don't give yourself the deep bend in the knees, the femur bones way back and apart, right? Like to break through your own glass ceiling in terms of peak performance. But if you're in a group and that's what they're doing, you do that. You become that. And they help you digest your regret. And it is, for me personally, it's been some of the most powerful experiences I've ever had, is when you have that kind of alignment with a group to do that. All right, and so I am going to say hi again. Hi again. We're going to get into a new screen share, and I'm going to be able to show you some more slides. All right. These opposites, I'm just going to bring us into some images. This is Waves, and this is Catechus by Alex Gray. And this Catechus by Alex Gray very much parallels the chakras. He's showing the intersections, how the Catechus is really the mythological symbol of equal and opposite energies. Equal and opposite energies that do what? That root to rise. Root is the root chakra down here at the bottom of the pelvis. Rise is the crown chakra. Everything I've talked about is the same, right? It's all, we're aligning this to the human physiology. We're saying like these energies, these principles, deep rejuvenation, peak performance, they're part of who we are. They're part of everything that we know. They're part of every element of nature. I am a surfer, and therefore I study waves. not intellectually, but just physically, right? Of just being in waves. And waves they come in cycles. They come in rhythms. And waves can entrain us to a rhythm. The way that each wave of energy rises and curls over to itself, it equally regresses and pulls back on itself. It's a circular motion. And you'll see even in the catechus or in the chakras, there's this very much this circular motion. There's a concept in Ayurveda in yoga, not Ayurveda, in yoga, and it arises in the tantric writings of yoga about 900 AD to 1300 AD around Spanda. There's a famous book called the Spanda Karakas. And this is this principle of contraction and expansion. Go in deep to expand out, become nothing to become something, and then become nothing again. The wave, it crashes back on itself, right? And it dissolves back, it pulls back, and then it helps feed the force of the ocean. So in this way, like we know this, we know deep rejuvenation to peak performance, we know the opposites, we know this experience, but part of the problem is like the way that we're oriented to the body, if we come from Western culture, is not to be aware of these equal and opposite energies. We're given much more of this like nuts and bolts, this much more in the flesh, in the muscle, in the bone tissue perspective. And we can forget how to pull our energy back into deep rejuvenation. And again, unless we're in a group, unless we're in a culture that's doing so, it can be really disorienting. And it can feel really disconnected unless we're like with a group of people who are doing this, who are getting the habits, who are living the habits that align to deep rejuvenation. It's really, really easy to just get into this, something's wrong with my body, things are out of control, I'm getting really tired, I'm losing mental focus, I'm not able to complete my projects on time. And to get more in this, not understanding that ego needs to dissolve into the universal, deep rejuvenation needs to take over. So I'm going to read a few things that some different thinkers say about these things, and then I'll again, you can post any questions or comments in the chat, and then I'll come back to the chat. Many of you know Dr. Vasant Lad. He's the author of most of the modern Ayurvedic echelon of books. I had the honor of being in his Gurukula program in 2004 in India, and he says some really profound things, and this is something this is the disease tree he's talking about here. Health is the effect of a healthy lifestyle and healthy habits. Disease is the tree sprouted from unhealthy habits. So this idea of a disease tree, the roots of the tree, and I'm not going to draw it out, well, I might later, but right now I won't. The roots of the tree, right? The roots of the tree are habits, daily habits. And again, we're going to go back to James Clear here in terms of the power of tiny habits. The roots of the tree are micro habits that sprout disease. And it can be, in this modern day and age, it can be things that are so subtle in our levels of consciousness around hurrying, just hurrying. Hurrying, if we go back to the last growth pattern, top end of that growth curve, right? Hurrying can be an emotion of trying to progress, but not sourcing energy from universal. Super subtle, but over time can sprout a tree of disease, can sprout an autoimmune disorder, can sprout inflammation that can lead to cancer, can have massive health consequences. Let me, and what am I looking for? Hold on just a second here. Yeah, okay. Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, he's a famous thinker and coach of like massive organizations and organizational growth. He says, we do not create and control our environment creates and controls us. The more we want to look at what are the deep rejuvenation habits, again, what are those micro habits that Dr. Vasant Lad's talking about? What are those little habits that actually unwind a disease tree and actually start to sprout a tree of health. It gets really interesting how that connects to the environment that we want to create. Part of this is, again, being in the right group. This is interesting from James Clear. Why remaining part of a group after achieving a goal is crucial to maintaining your habits. It's friendship and community that embed a new identity and help behaviors last over the long run. So if we create an environment in not James's book, but Benjamin Hardy's book, and I'll read a quote from Benjamin Hardy, willpower doesn't work. Benjamin Hardy argues that part of your environment that Marshall's talking about here is your relational environment. So if you're not in a relational environment of people that have the habits of deep rejuvenation, we now know deep rejuvenation is what fuels peak performance. You see where this is going? If you don't have your relational environment, meaning the people that are influencing you day in and day out, if they don't have the habits of deep rejuvenation, you're not going to hit your peak performance. And that's intense. You know, that to me, it's a bit of an intense concept. And that brings us back to Jim Rohn, who's a modern business, he was a modern business guru. He said, don't join an easy crowd. You won't grow. Go where the expectation and the demands to perform are high. Now, you could exchange, if you're in here and you're on your healing journey, you can just flip out that word perform and swap in the word heal. Don't join an easy crowd. You won't. You can also put it in for grow. You won't heal. Go where the expectation and the demands to heal are high. You guys following me? It's kind of amazing. If we see these are all different edges of thought leadership, and if we start to combine them and we start to see, like, is there a healing environment? Are there people around me? Am I surrounded by influences that are helping me go to deeper and deeper states of rejuvenation, who are helping me? Again, remember that deep rejuvenation part of the curve? That's integrity. Are there people helping me become in integrity with my body, knowing that my body is complicated? Healing is really complicated in many ways, and in other ways it can be somewhat simple. We also don't know how long healing is going to take. We already talked about that side of it, how you can have gotten yourself in really, really, really deep from being really, really out of integrity with what your body actually needs or what your mind actually needs, or not listening to your intuition, overriding that from your level of your ego. And in this kosha perspective, that's a misalignment between, or you could say it's a missed opportunity that's now arising as an opportunity to pursue, between the mental kosha, the manomaya kosha, the mental sheath, and the intuitive sheath, the vijnanamaya kosha, or the knowledge sheath. So again, if we can be in an environment of people who have a very broad perspective of what thrive looks like, who are orienting towards thrive, who are living in alignment with their own integrity, just knowing when they're out of integrity. And it's in the middle, it's the little million things. I'm going to go back to our million little things here. James Clear has this illustration, and I have his permission to use it. And this is coming from a book he recently released. And in this, he's just showing that 1% better every day equals 37% better in a year. Better what? Just a little gain, just a little improvement. What the Japanese named the word kaizen, a small continuous improvement. So you don't ditch the improvement you made yesterday, you build on it. How much? 1% equals what? 37.78% gain in a year. If you look at this in terms of sleep, what does it look if your sleep gets better 1% each day? Like, even just think tonight, like, what little thing would you need to do tonight to get a little bit of a deeper rest? So this morning with Indigo, we rehearsed what it's going to look like tonight after gymnastics practice, so that she has a better day tomorrow. She'll also get to sleep in tomorrow. But what it'll look like is she comes home from the gym, it'll be 8 o'clock. She'll eat whatever she needs to eat. It'll be warm and hot so that she can sleep for about 11 hours. And that's it. It's a little gain. What's the 1% improvement that we did? We just visualized it before she went to school today. Let's rehearse how this is going to go for you and me at 8 p.m. Very small thing to do. Doesn't take much time. Setting intention into motion. Yogis have rocked at setting intention into motion for a very long time. I was trained in it. Really easy to bring up. Most of you have been trained in it. Really simple thing to do. That's a 1% improvement. The opposite side of this is what happens when, and this is so fascinating. You see that dotted line in the middle? Is what happens when you don't improve. And what's fascinating about what happens when you don't improve, when you're not doing 1% improvements, is you tend not to stay in the same place. You tend to actually regress. And the way I think about this is if I go back to these values that we have at Yoga Healer and Yoga Health Coaching, these are statements of universal truth. They're not really particular at all to Yoga Healer. People want to be guided into their potential. We all do. We all do. It's the nature of consciousness itself, is to explore and to be more. Now, consciousness itself isn't neutral. It's positive. Consciousness itself created self-reflected human beings, for goodness sake. And when we're in health, we experience positivity. We don't experience neutrality. So when we're in our natural state, which is health, we experience an orientation towards the positive, not towards the neutral. This is so important to realize. There's no such thing as the dotted line. What happens is regression. So negativity takes over and it's trying to plummet you. It's not because it's bad, it's just trying to plummet you back into your own integrity. That is lessons learned. In Ayurveda, that's called prajna parada. I'll type it in our little chat window, and I might spell it wrong because I'm a bit multitasking here. P-A-R-A-G-N-A. Prajna, the jna in that means wisdom. And parada is that there's a failure. They even say it's a failure of the intellect. We're so far out of integrity, we're not even willing to look at our own integrity. We're not even willing to say, like, okay, here, me and Indigo this morning, okay, here, what is on your plate? Like, where can we just relax? Where can we orient towards thrive? What does this afternoon look like? What needs to happen next? And if we don't do that, and we just keep motoring on through pedal to the metal, willpower, buck up, kid, go to school, let's go, let's get out of here, right? That attitude, that's going to lead to more and more repressed emotion, A, bad parenting, B, but worse every day. And her immune system could collapse and she could forget a cold. She could get sick, right? Now, if we look at this in terms of peak performance, deep rejuvenation, and we go back more to this picture here, is what happens over time with us as adults is energy inefficiency, and we get sick. So 1% worse over the course of the year means we have set up our physiology for disease. And that's what Dr. Ladd is talking about here in terms of the roots, right, for this disease tree are growing. And they're going so strong. When a root gets strong enough, it gets to rise, whether it's health or disease. When the disease tree root gets strong enough, it's pushing energy into a shoot. Now, the way that Ayurveda looks at allopathy in terms of disease, it says allopathy is a really hard time diagnosing the initial stages of disease. They'll even say it has a really hard time initially diagnosing the first 4 stages of disease, and it excels at diagnosing stage 5 and stage 6, manifestation and differentiation. By the time you're there, you're hard to heal. It's complex. There's been integrity gaps going on for a very, very long time. There's been stuff going on not supporting health for a really long time. There's been 1% worse every day for a really long time. And chances are there's also a group culture that hasn't had a high expectation of personal health integrity, a high expectation of integrity on all 5 levels of koshas. Again, Ayurvedic perspective. That's hard to heal. And that's where you really get into what Lynn was saying, like healing is time intensive and money intensive, right? And that can happen. We see it happening all the time. So then the question is like, what does it look like to be in a situation where everyone's helping everyone get healthier, become more in integrity, when everyone's helping everyone have habits of deep rejuvenation and peak performance? And what are some of the habits that a group might be doing?